we are going to be living in the metaverse in a very real way in 5 years from now. You are going to be investing in literally everything around you, from the furniture in your house to the title to your car to the artists that you know and love. The tokenization of everything is upon us. And I think we're getting some really cool games where you are going to be borrowing against millions of dollars of social capital and tokens that are spun up in thin air. So I would say right now, if you're thinking to prepare for that future, now is the time to land grab as many new assets as you can, because in 5 years, you're going to be able to put those to work in really meaningful and exciting ways.
Good Morning Metaverse, a Web3 and NFT podcast.
Welcome to the Good Morning Metaverse podcast. Thank you all for listening in today. This podcast is really going to focus on Web3, NFTs, the intersection of creators and community. My name is Josh Gordon. I'm a producer and podcast host with Mint Songs, who's powering this podcast. We're going to be interviewing, experts, entrepreneurs, early stage investors, a bunch of people involved in the Web3 space and helping push it forward. Today, we've got an amazing first guest, Cooper, and we're going to walk through a lot of what he's seeing in the music space and talk through his experience with the creator economy and DAOs as well. So all these podcasts are going to start off with a quick tip. Now, a real goal of this is to share information and help other people become builders, collectors, and investors in this NFT and Web3 space. And one of the most powerful things you can do to start off your learning journey is to really curate who you're following on Twitter, where a lot of this information is shared in real time. So a couple great follows are going to be Punk6529. He puts out really insightful Twitter threads on, the NFT space in general. I am DC Investor, dropping knowledge on DeFi, Ethereum, and has one of the best curations of NFT artworks out there. And lastly, you can check out the Crypto Core Naval Twitter list. Tons of great people on that Twitter list that you can dive into and follow yourself. And of course, our podcast guest, Coopahtroopa. Let's bring him on now. Cooper, thank you for joining us today. How you doing, man?
Hey, Josh. I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I was just telling you before we started recording, I think that you are one of the most articulate and well-versed people in the space talking about, the importance of NFTs, of Web3, and really like the vision of where you think we're heading. So I'm excited to dive into this. And I know you're super passionate about it. I think to start off, can you just give everybody who may not be familiar with the work you've done a background on you and what you're the projects you're working on right now?
Absolutely. So I've been working in crypto for about 5 years now. I started from a creative lens coming out of school with a music business degree, went into crypto as an entirely self-taught and self-learned industry, got very deep down the DeFi rabbit hole, started to do a lot of journalism in that space. Very quickly realized that financial products weren't really for me until I got more interested in the creator economy, working with some of my friends who are launching social tokens. I helped start a few DAOs like Friends with Benefits. I helped launch a bunch of tokens, so projects like Audius and SuperAir. And today I kind of sit at this intersection of culture and crypto, really as an operator and investor, and just helping people go from 0 to 1 to doing creative experiments with crypto.
Amazing. I would say that, that trajectory you've gone on is, you've touched on all these different points in Web3. I mean, some people are just collectors, some people are just investors. And when I hear you describe that, I'm really seeing you, transcend all these different topics and touch points in crypto. What was the light bulb moment that you had that inspired you to really kick this off? I'm interested in that. And I'm also kind of interested in your very first crypto interaction. Like maybe it was discovering Bitcoin or something. Like what kicked that off?
Yeah, so I was taking a class in college called The Future of Music Technology. One of my professors talked to us about the idea of smart contracts. So basically a technology that allows you to pay anyone in the world for a fraction of a cent in real time. For those people who aren't aware of the music industry, if I stream your song on Spotify today, you probably won't see any payment from that for 3 to 6 months. So when I heard about a new technology that really expedited that process, it made perfect sense to me. As I started to look under the hood, I realized that smart contracts were built on something called Ethereum. I recognized that there were cryptocurrencies outside of Ether and sort of the wider crypto network. And so I spent a lot of my time really just diving in head first. I've always been a curator first and foremost. I was selling Pokemon cards on eBay in college. I was doing music curation for This Song Is Sick. And so there was a lot of different areas and sectors that I like to become proficient in. And when I saw crypto as sort of this wider design space, I was fresh out of college, didn't see myself working a 9 to 5. And so I said, hey, let me just learn anything and everything about this space. Started doing a lot of trading, and then eventually over time sort of started to realize the secret sauce that is learning how to invest and be creative in crypto.
So that secret sauce you mentioned, where do you think someone wanting to follow that same path, work full time in crypto, where is that right now in like today's current landscape?
I think it's within DAOs and Discords. I think more broadly, finding social clubs to spend your time in is really, really important. So if you are a creative that is looking to get more involved in the space, you can obviously learn a lot just by following people on Twitter, but the reality is you're going to learn a lot more by doing the actions yourself on chain and by doing those with friends. And so finding spaces where you can go in and have meaningful, productive conversations with people who are learning with you, it's going to be the easiest way to learn. The reality is it's going to take a couple months of time and energy to get through the loop. You're probably going to get rugged a few times. I like to say that there's a rite of passage associated with crypto. And so please don't expect to see a lot of success out of the gate. Expect to really throw yourself in the ringer, surround yourself by other people that are also just aping into things. Then I think one thing leads to another and you end up having a couple wins under your belt.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about some of the things people can do in Discord, and especially, getting your foot in the door with DAOs. Originally, the way I was thinking about Discord is really from I'm reading comments, I'm asking questions, but how can you give any advice on how to be tactical advice on how to be a really good engaged Discord person? If you to contribute off the bat besides just being someone that kind of monitors throughout the day?
Yeah, first and foremost, you're going to look for the GM channel in every Discord. You're going to want to go in there and push GM in the chat every single morning. If you can start doing that, I think you're on the right path. I would say more specifically, most channels have an introductions channel. So I always make sure when I enter into a community to let people know that I am there, give a quick background on myself. And I'll typically find that one or two members of that community will reach out to me to have a conversation about what's happening. I think for someone who's new to Discord, recognizing that there's a lot of noise and that you should just spend your time learning who the key contributors are is probably most productive. So rather than making sure that you're reading every channel, keep an eye on who's getting the most emote reacts in those channels. Keep an eye on who's being able to use the @everyone command, who has moderator roles and who has different social tiers in those Discords, and just familiarize yourself with sort of the organizational structure. I think you're going to learn a lot more by following the key contributors to that community rather than trying to keep up with each and every conversation that's happening. Within any given Discord community, identify the 3 to 5 leaders that are sort of running it on a day-to-day, and then find 1 to 2 channels that are highly active and highly relevant to you and make yourself aware and present in those conversations.
Totally. I saw some conversation just on Twitter recently about how many people you can be friends with in real life. Like there's this number, 150 people you can keep connections with in real life realistically. What do you think is your approach to Discord interaction? Between, right now, I would say I'm probably in more Discords than I can actively contribute in. How many are you looking to really dive in and focus on a time before you're saying, okay, I can't divide my energies up, anymore?
I think Discord is a social graph. I think that joining servers is more meant to be a social signal than it is something that you contribute to meaningfully. So what I mean by this is when you DM someone on Discord, there's something called mutual servers. You can see which servers you're in with somebody else. And I basically view the Discord servers I'm joining as legitimacy for the conversations that I'm having. And so if someone DMs me and I see that we have 20 mutual servers, and I look at those mutual servers and I see that they're all very high impact communities, I'm going to spend a lot more time on that conversation. To answer that question about how I juggle my time amongst my servers, I have one folder that's the ones that I'm trying to check basically every day. That's anywhere from 3 to 5 servers that I'm keeping up with. And then more broadly, I'm just categorizing things by different benchmarks or umbrellas. So things like an NFT folder, things like a DeFi server, things like a DAO server, having sort of different categories to pop into from time to time, and then treating my DMs as my email. So I really don't check email that much anymore. I tell people if they want to have a chat with me, let's do it on Discord. And so I basically use that as my catch-up ground. And by nature of me sort of spending my time answering my email on Discord, it's a lot more likely that I'll kind of pop into a different channel and keep up with what's happening there.
For sure. Yeah. Wow. I did not expect to talk about Discord off the bat like that, but that was actually some pretty tactical advice there. I'm going to try to implement some of that too. Okay. So following up on that is going back to how you got into crypto before we kind of jump into some of these projects you're working on and interested right now. I'm curious, you got into it way before, I'd say, this NFT boom. A lot of the people coming into crypto right now are, discovering it, I would say, within the last 12 months. And that's awesome. something I think a collective is going through is, how do we talk to our friends and family about, these topics and projects we're interested in? And I'd say it's hard for a lot of people now, probably infinitely harder for you when you were, first diving into it during school and out of school. How have you handled like that criticism from maybe some of the people closest to you, or maybe don't have the belief in the space that you have? Like, does it make it more difficult to commit to this kind of work?
I like to say that you are the result of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So as you look around you and you think about the people you're actively talking to on a day-to-day basis, really challenge yourself to put people around you who inspire and educate you. And so if you're someone who's passionate about crypto and you think that there's a lot of potential in this, don't worry about trying to sell your 4 closest friend on this. Go ahead and find new people around you that are equally as passionate about it. I think what I found the most successful is recognizing that people will come around to crypto eventually. It's not your job to sell them on it. It's your job to help educate and inspire them once they see that vision clearly. And so what that means is recognizing, crypto, Twitter, Discord, these are all very vibrant social community oceans. And so you can find a lot of meaningful friends online, but you have to be comfortable with the fact that those are going to be new interactions and you have to really put yourself out there. And so rather than trying to stay grounded in a small friend group that you've developed since high school, a lot of these communities have meetups. A lot of these social channels have town halls and digital events and whatnot. Put yourself over the edge. Just put yourself in a position to meet new people. And I think what you're going to find is if you are intentional about how you're spending time and you're passionate about what you're doing, you're going to bump heads with some other people that are passionate as well. And I think that's kind of the start to this wonderful crypto journey.
Nicely said. I definitely resonate with a lot of what you just mentioned. All right. Good advice. I'd say let's move on from kind of your background and get to some of these projects, especially related to music that we were talking about. I'd like to transition into them, starting from a question that I wasn't expecting to ask. And if you want to move on, we can. But a quick, simple definition of what an NFT is from you, why it's valuable, and then transition to talk about these projects. And the reason I throw that out is because honestly, I really like the way you describe things. So, people listening to this pod, this may be new information for them, and maybe they haven't heard it described in the way that I think you can.
Sure. So I'd say NFTs are unique and often scarce digital assets. These can represent collectibles. This can represent artwork, but this concept of non-fungibility is what makes it unique. So in the same way that you wouldn't trade one Tesla for another Hyundai car, you probably wouldn't trade one NFT for another. This is different from a fungible token, which is a 1-to-1 exchange rate. If I have $1, I'm going to give you $1. With an NFT, you have 2 assets. They're unique from one another. They have unique traits and unique rarities, and that allows there to be sort of interesting collection games that happen on top of it. I think the reason that this is interesting from a creative lens is NFTs allow us to have direct-to-fans relationships with uncapped ceilings on them. So in the traditional world, if I want to support an artist, I'm typically buying a t-shirt of theirs for $60. I'm buying a concert ticket for $50, or I'm streaming their track 100 times on Spotify. If I'm someone who wants to really go out and support that artist, there are very limited ways to do so. What we've seen with NFTs is that you now have a wider design space where artists can have more provably scarce assets, and they can have channels to interact with those fans in a very unproven way. And so if I'm someone who has a lot of capital and I want to support an artist, NFTs are sort of the access point to build that relationship. And I think why we're seeing a lot of success now, specifically within the creator lens, is people who are very passionate about these projects are using their capital to signal how passionate they are about that creator. And through that relationship, they're able to start working together. They're able to start having active dialogue. And I think that intention of building super fan communities through something like an NFT is the reason why they're so valuable today.
And is the interactions you're talking about with, someone who can purchase this NFT from an artist, is that fall under the broader umbrella of the creator economy that I know you talk about a lot, or is that it? And
it definitely falls under the umbrella. I think a case study that I'll use is my friends Delphi Digital bought Disclosure's face NFT for about $100,000. This NFT allowed you to have VIP plus 4 passes for life. But what we found is immediately after that auction, there was a group chat set up between Delphi and Guy from Disclosure. Those guys are close friends. And just this last month in New York, Delphi hired and contracted Disclosure to come out and play a private party for about 250 people. Normally in that setting, I don't think Disclosure would ever take on that opportunity. But because there was that communication that was set up between them, they're able to have this open conversation. They're able to curate this amazing lineup and have this incredible 3-hour set. And I think that intent of having a creator connect directly with the fan in a really meaningful way to do deeper work is sort of the exact thesis of what I think the creator economy makes so valuable.
And I mean, let's just dive into it now then. I was going to say, I'd be interested to hear from you, your perspective on the range of music meets crypto, like NFT drops, and what we can learn from some of them, which ones have been successful, and does that translate to the smaller artist as well, or is it something that really only maybe more like A-list artists can tap into and make the most of? So just threw out a lot there. Maybe let's start with covering some of the drops that you've been really impressed by, or you know, artist meet crypto collaborations that you're interested in.
Yeah, so the drops that I've been impressed by on the music side, there are very few of them. I think the reality is that many people had their managers throw up a nifty gateway drop and make hundreds of thousands of dollars on the back of their fans collecting a novel asset. I think that what broke there is that these artists were not educated about crypto community. They had no intention of building relationships beyond that initial sale. And so what we saw was a very big drop off where on the surface, these artists were doing well because they were selling millions of dollars of assets. But on the secondary market, there was no activity because there was no follow-on intention from those artists. And so the things that do excite me are artists who are taking a really intentional approach about building crypto community in Web3. There's an artist named Daniel Allen who recently ran a crowdfund on Mirror for 50 ETH to advance his next EP. I think that that's fascinating. My friend RAC has a social token called RAC coin, which I think is really fascinating. There are a couple others that I can talk through over time here, but I would say more broadly, the things that are most exciting to me about music NFTs have nothing to do with the sales volume that you're doing and have a lot more to do with the community ownership that you're building and the ability for fans to contribute on a really meaningful way.
Yeah, I do want to jump into both the projects you're talking about. But like first is to even start as an artist to contribute to these communities, to build communities. I mean, it's probably a fair statement that 99% of artists don't have any crypto exposure yet. So a lot of people are going to be starting as beginners. And if you are an artist that really has these good intentions, but you are starting fresh, like in 2021, maybe in 2022, what's the first step you take? I've heard you talk about owning high value assets is a signal that, you're invested in these communities, that you're, culturally relevant. Do they have to own NFTs, that are significant in the first place, or can they go about the foundation of their crypto career in another way?
I think that you should invest with your time and not your capital. I think finding a couple communities to get really invested in and showing that you're here to learn is really, really exciting to me. I don't think it's about allocating $10,000 to a profile picture out of the gate. I think it's more about being immersed in a culture, doing a couple drops with people, minting things for a very low amount that feel very fun with your friends. Over time, I think that those things turn into high value assets, but I don't think that you need to go in and try and snipe a high value asset to prove legitimacy. I think you earn your legitimacy by buying something so early on that becomes legit, that people recognize that you're following the wave. You're not just trying to ride it behind. You're actually creating that and you're making the moves that people want to see. And so if you're getting started in crypto today, I think it's always a good bet to have a little bit of ether to allocate that things that come on the table, but don't go out and blindly buy 50 things on OpenSea. Sit with that capital, sit in these communities, be open and aware of conversations that are happening, and really try and have productive, intentional actions on chain that match the values of the communities that you're building with.
Gotcha. So maybe it sounds like you're thinking, if you're new to this space, it's a lot better instead of tweeting, like I've seen a lot of celebrities do, hey, want to learn more about NFTs, what should I buy? Instead, make your first appearance in a Discord channel and say, like, GM, say what's up, ask them what's going on, stuff like that.
That's exactly right. And I think you'll find that this mold that you follow as a creative is going to inform directly how you build your community moving forward. And so in order to know how to build a successful creator economy, you have to have been through one yourself. You're not just going to show up out of the blue and just have a vibrant Discord server popping. I think that you spending time in channels that have gained a small amount of success and pulling away key learnings from there is a really important thing to do. And so for artists today, I've noticed that there's a very quick learning curve. If you spend 1 to 2 months really getting educated in this space, you will be far beyond a lot of your peers. What I'm really excited about is kind of kickstarting that process where I can inspire an artist to start taking those steps themselves. And then I check back with them 3 weeks later, and they're now educating 5 of their peers who are also producers to kind of get involved the same way. And so this sort of word of mouth, niche community scaling is actually where I think most of the traction is going to come from. And so if you are someone that's looking to get in the space, please don't ask your friends what NFTs to buy. Please try and spend your time looking to make those decisions yourself. I think you're going to wake up one day and realize that you're the one who's educating all of your friends around you.
Good points. So, all right, let's go from there. Let's jump to some of those projects you just mentioned. You mentioned that one friend, Daniel, basically ran a Kickstarter to generate ETH. So now that they can put out an album. Is that accurate?
Yeah, more or less. So there was a 50 ETH crowdfund that was done for 50% of the artist share of his next EP that's coming up. There's now a token gated Discord server with a governance discussion around the way that that's being rolled out. And there's a community treasury, which is holding all of those funds to hire contributors to the project. What I'll quickly say is that getting capital in the door is not the hardest thing in the world in crypto these days. I think if you're remotely competent and you have the right people around you, it's very easy to crowdfund. But what's a lot more difficult is to actually build growth and traction around the idea that you started with. And so running small experiments around having a community really own and operate an EP is a really fascinating experiment to me, and one that I'm actively putting my time and energy in to see come into life.
Yeah, I actually had one of my questions for you was, do you think artists and musicians will transition to like the DAO framework where they'll launch a token, establish, the goal of essentially growing their artist brand, and then all the positions will get decentralized from management to touring to marketing, producers, designers, and like essentially allowing people to work with them along the process. Is this project going to be quite as decentralized in terms of community members being incentivized to contribute with the growth, or are they really investors?
I think it's a mix of both. I think that you're always optimizing for that top 1% of contributors who are going to be doing meaningful work for you. I think to your question about will this disintermediate and restructure music industry norms? Yes, over a very long time horizon. I think that in the future, you are going to be selecting your partners based on who's actively involved in your project. It's not going to be you pitching to labels and have them run the whole thing for you. You are going to hire those people internally from your Discord server. And so when I think about what's exciting here, resetting the slate, recognizing that being on the editorial side of Spotify doesn't matter. What matters is getting 100 super fans in your community. I think that that's a way more valuable thought thesis to run. And so for a lot of these artists that are starting out, you can build a shit ton of value off the back of 100 super fans. And so doing everything you can to incentivize them to have meaningful ownership stakes in these community is the best way to start making an impact for yourself and trying to get outside of the mold that I think a lot of other people are caught up in right now.
Do you think any of this is going to compromise the artist's ability to create? I mean, once you start having to get this input, maybe, literally people are going to be voting on certain aspects of your work and what you're putting out. How do you see that meshing together? I've done a lot of work with artists and in the past from a management perspective. I got this picture right here with one of my best friends, had a music career. And I know that them holding all the autonomy is important. So how do those balance?
I think the community is there to vibe check your creative process, not to make every decision for you. I don't think there's a world in which the community is voting for you on what scenario you use in your next single, but I do think there's a world in which they are directionally signaling on whether or not the ethos and the vibe of your creation is headed in the right way. So in the same way today that if I have a label deal, they need to sign off on the music that I'm releasing. I think this is the exact same thing, but this time it's coming from a community of your fans. And I think the difference here is the more transparent and sort of public you are about your creation process with your fans, the higher likelihood it is that they're going to support anything and everything that you do. And I also think it's important to recognize that you are no longer limited to only being able to release things that your fans say you can. There is going to be certain projects which are meant to have more of a targeted budget behind them. And so what we'll start to see is that artists feel a lot more free about how they're releasing music because they know that those fans are there to consume everything that they have to offer, not just the polished projects. And I think that ability for artists to be a lot more open, free, and transparent in what they're working on and not feel like they have to just ship giant project after giant project, I think it's going to lead to a lot more design space, a lot more creative collaboration, and through that, a lot more ownership and interest from fans as well.
Totally. So this artist that ran the crowdfunding to raise funds for their project, what did you see done really right in that execution that others can learn from?
Really getting down to details on what this project meant and sort of the intention behind it. If you read that Mirror crowdfund campaign, it was really well written. There was a lot of different tiers and ways for people to get involved. There was very clear breakdown of the people involved on the team, of the use of funds, of sort of the intent behind it, how things are going to work mechanically. I think it's okay to say that you don't know what you're doing, but it's very important that you say that very clear and directly so that people who get involved have a clear understanding of what's happening. I think, like I said before, getting the money in the door is not really a hard thing to do in crypto right now, but making sure you actually have the time, effort, and commitment to give to it is way more valuable. So what I look for is less about how is this song performing on Spotify and more about like how actively is that artist being engaged in their Discord on a day-to-day basis. The success of these projects is going to be directly correlated to your involvement in the community. So if I'm backing an artist that's running a crypto crowdfund, I'm going to make that investment based on the fact that that artist has been in the mix for a long time. They're willing to be highly adaptive and highly knowledgeable in the space. And my bet is basically a convicted interest that you are going to take more time out of researching music and instead put more time into building community.
Yeah, well said. I guess, you know, I want to say that I'll definitely make sure that we link the description of that project in our show notes so that people can go and find it themselves. I'd be curious in reading it too. You want to transition to talk about the token and RAC and the work that you saw there being done? And I think you had a hand in that drop too, right?
I did. Yeah. So I'd say broadly speaking, there's a very interesting movement happening around creators issuing their own social token for their projects. So I think RAC was one of the first notable musicians to do this. There are a couple of creators on Rally that are doing this as well. Portugal the Man, Jaws, Wookie being cool examples of this. I think specifically within the electronic music lens, this sort of idea of like investing in Dogecoin is very synonymous with what it means to invest in your favorite DJ. So we have this interesting design space happening where artists are creating assets that represent ownership in their communities, but they're doing it in a very free form way. You know, using a platform like Rally, you can buy that with a credit card for $5 on a Twitch stream. And I think what's happening is we're seeing these social tokens be on-ramps into superfan communities. But the reality is no one knows what these look like at scale. You know, right now there's basically these novelty experiments where even the artists themselves are still pretty all over the place in how they're using their tokens. But I think the fact that you are starting to see ways to invest directly in the artists that you know and love is a really strong signal, and one that I'm paying very close attention to try and refine those mechanics over time.
Yeah, the concept of artists releasing tokens has been something I've been trying to, work through here now. And this may tie into what you said about really targeting, your 1% of your top fans, not necessarily all of them, but what happens when 100 artists are all dropping tokens? I mean, how can, as a consumer of music and someone wanting to engage in this way, how can I manage all those different tokens? That feels like it could get to the scaling point where it's almost impossible to keep up with. And it's you almost have a bag of assets that you don't even know you don't know what's going on between all of them. Do you see that as being a problem, or is it really, there's no limit to the amount of tokens you can collect amongst artists?
I think there is no limit to the amount of tokens you can collect among artists. In the same way that my MetaMask wallet currently has 200 different tokens, I would say of all of the shitcoins that are out there in the world right now, there is probably 1% that's allocated to the creative lens of things. I think that people are far more likely to invest in a brand or a community that they know and trust than they are and go buy some random energy project on the side. And so I would say it's less about the quantity of tokens being issued and more about the quality of those contributions. So if I'm an artist launching a token, I need to have full intent that this is a very long-term decision for myself. I need to set up channels for people to get involved in governance, channels for people to earn ownership stakes. And over time, what you're going to find is that buying that token is no longer an investment decision. It's a contribution decision. And so if you know an artist and you want to get involved with their community, you will use that token as an access point into their community. And once you're inside those doors, I think it's up to the artist and their team to create working spaces for you to come and add meaningful value.
Should artists approach the token and fan interaction as an investment or really as a connecting point? I mean, they can be both, but if you were to put one as the primary goal, which one is it? Because I think I've been considering it investment first, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, connection first. I think that it's very obvious that you want to make money on the back of anything that you're investing in a community. But what I've seen time and time again is that communities that are based on the back of connections will be exponentially more valuable than those that are focused on financial value. And so if you are creating anything in crypto, starting very small and grassroots, starting from a circle of 5 to 10 fans, expanding out to 20, 50, 100, et cetera, that blueprint is going to work exponentially more than airdropping a token to 10,000 of your fans and expecting them to know what's going on. I think that crypto has a very weird relationship where if you go with a bigger splash, you're going to see a lot more success in the short term. So you'll see your token go straight up. You'll see your net worth on paper be super, super high, and you'll think you're doing a great job. But more times than not, what happens is that token price comes crashing right back down and people get really pissed. I think that's fundamentally different from starting in a very small place and just gradually ramping up over time in a very natural and organic manner. And so if you're experimenting in this space, don't worry about getting everyone in the world to buy your tokens and buy your coins. Try and set up pockets within your community channels like Discord for highly active contributors to have meaningful conversation. And over time, educate them that the reason that those conversations are possible are because of these new crypto assets. And I think the more that you can do that, the more value you're going to see in the success from a price and a social standpoint.
Yeah. What about multiple? So I'm going to just throw something out here. Are you familiar with cyberkongs?
Mm-hmm.
So, they have the banana token, and I saw recently that something they were doing is basically giving permission for other NFT communities to utilize their banana token within their projects. And I'm curious, do you think that artists will ever, name a big name artist and other artists can get permission to use their token within their communities? Or is an artist token locked into that and that there won't be separation? I'm almost thinking this could be a way that rap groups, share, connections and upside between each other or something like that.
Yeah, I think there are creator tokens, there are community tokens. I think that what I've seen is that community tokens have a higher likelihood of success than creator tokens. I don't think that those worlds are mutually exclusive, but I think we'll see a lot more experiments where an artist kickstarts their crypto flywheel. They realize that their community is bigger than their one individual brand. And so they graduate into something where they're just now a stakeholder in this wider community initiative.
Gotcha. What is someone, let's say you're in your Discord and you started your flywheel, you're in other Discords, you're building your reputation as someone who's committed to, building through Web3 and the intersection of music. What is your next step after, kind of getting that ground level education and engagement in? How do you take your flywheel to that next step of building?
I would say running one small, very meaningful experiment within your community. This is not trying to drop 10,000 PFP projects and raise $1 million. This is trying to launch something for 10 to 15 people who care and just seeing what the reception of it is. So something as small as doing a PO-op for your next show, something as small as offering a small amount of tokens to people who come to a town hall, something like doing a one of one of your songs on catalog. There are very small experiments that you can do to show that you're highly aware of what's happening in crypto right now. And the more legitimacy that you can prove from a wider crypto narrative perspective, the more fans are going to be willing to get behind you and the more meaningful stuff that you can do.
Yeah, I think the PO-ops are an interesting mechanism to introduce to shows kind of for all sorts of engagement activities. Quantifying who's like my number one fan is just an interesting thought. Maybe that's whoever owns the most of your token. Maybe it's whoever has, the most presence and has collected the tokens of, showing up to shows or whatnot. But being able to display that, I think, is an interesting way to, take this stuff to the next level.
Yeah. Can I add a comment there real fast?
Yeah, please.
So I think that it's very easy for artists to look at the benefit of this as identifying their top fans. I think the real value in these artist tokens is fans being able to connect with one another. So if you think about yourself going to concerts, there are hundreds of people around you in the venue that all like the exact same music as you, but you will never meet any of them. And so thinking about your community token as a way to build better relationships among fans, I actually think the success is less tied to your access directly to them as a creator and more about the access to this community as a whole. So when I was in college, I spent a lot of time in things like Grizz Family, Pretty Lights Family. I was a big, fan of a band called STS9. Electronic groups like Illenium have a really diehard following, Porter Robinson, you name it. All of these communities, I think, are best suited to tap into crypto because it's bigger than the creator themselves. A lot of those initiatives are stemming from a love in a shared music, but they're happening around the individual members of that community. So as you think about the role that this token plays in your ecosystem, I don't think it's about selling your individual time. I don't think it's about trying to have 100 Zoom calls with 100 different fans. I think it's about using those tokens to prove trust and legitimacy in conversations and setting up social pockets so that someone in Philadelphia can meet with someone in Los Angeles over a Zoom call and know that the reason that that connection was made possible is because you both hold an asset that represents ownership in a brand of the artist that you know and love.
These things being bigger than the artists themselves and the communities, you could just start really brainstorming so many ideas that flow from that. That's awesome. So you mentioned, as you bring up these artists, something that popped into my mind was the longevity of an artist's career. I think you've spoken on this a few times, but do you think that the integration of crypto and social tokens or community tokens is going to expand the longevity of an artist's career? And, kind of second question on top of that is, what happens when an artist's career runs its course and maybe they don't want to make music anymore, or careers end? So what happens to the community and token after that? Does that have to be do you have to start thinking of that at the inception, or is that something you can figure out along the way and maybe your community picks up and figures out for you?
I think it figures itself out along the way. I think that your mission as someone creating a token is to be able to have it be self-sustainable. So in the event that you step away from your project, it will still exist and thrive. I like to say that FWB has become as exciting as it has today, because if I go run away for 3 months to an island in Europe, I'm going to come back and know that FWB is working harder than ever and shipping more products than ever before. So I think when you start out creating some of these tokens, the onus rests entirely on the creator to make it successful. But your job should be to empower as many key contributors around you and as many community members as possible so that they can take on key ownership membership stakes in that community. To answer your question about longevity, too early to tell what happens over like a 20-year time horizon. The reality is most of these tokens will go to zero. I don't think that they're very much different from like new startups or new tokens in general. But I think through that mix, there will be a handful of these projects that go from an artist with 50 followers in their bedroom to being one of the biggest played artists in the world. And for those fans who spent the time to actually get involved when they had 50 followers, it is literally going to change their lives. And I think that those experiments are the one that I'm trying to keep an eye out for.
For sure. So, you mentioned, being an artist that's the most streamed in the world. So I feel like that's a good transition. It's some other projects that we may want to dive into. I know you've got involvement in Catalog. You mentioned Royal to me earlier and Audius. Do you want to pick one and kind of jump on in and explain what's really interesting and going on there that we should be paying attention to?
Sure. Let's just go ahead on all three of them. I'll start with Audius because this is the one that I've done the most work for. Audius is a decentralized music streaming platform. It allows you to sign in with an email and a password and take advantage of a crypto native platform that you would never know exists on crypto rails. And so we have dozens of really incredible artists that are releasing all types of incredible content. We have ways for you to earn tokens and ownership in the network for creating value for it. And we are very soon going to be adding in a lot of new incentive programs that if you are an artist who's creating and building community in music, you can use Audius as your home base to be able to do that. I'm very excited about that token, the role that it plays in the ecosystem. That's something I was very involved in. I'm very excited about the new work that's being done on Solana. I think it's going to introduce a lot of new ways to run micro experiments that get closer to this free and permissionless world that I had mentioned at the start of the podcast. And I think more broadly, when it comes to being able to show legitimacy in crypto as a musician, putting your music on Audius is literally the easiest thing you could do. It's the exact same thing as uploading to SoundCloud. It takes a few minutes and you have to have no crypto to get started. But starting from there and at least having your catalog up there and starting to build outwards from that as your home base feels like a really powerful signal to me. I'm seeing a lot of interesting traction on Catalog right now, which I'm really excited about. So for those who aren't aware of Catalog, it is a digital record store that allows you to press one-of-one records. We're now seeing a lot of independent artists uploading one-of-one versions of their songs and offer exclusive benefits to collectors for collecting them. And so there's now a small working group that's been set up around catalog collectors to start talking about the future of music. I think that this is a very healthy and productive conversation. And we're now starting to experiment with what does it mean to have your source file live on chain? What does it mean to have your original recording, represented as an NFT and allow people to pull from that? I think we're very early in those conversations, but it's one that I'm paying close attention to. And last but not least, Royal, started by my close friend, Justin Blau. What does it mean to invest in the artist music that you know and love? They're creating a platform that allows you to invest directly in artist royalties and doing it in a really compliant way, working directly with regulators. And so I think conceptually, this will start out as something that resembles Nifty Gateway, but being able to invest directly in huge talented acts that you know and love today, all the way down to more grassroots individuals, I think it's an amazing step in the right direction. I'm really excited for it to roll out in the next couple of months here. For sure.
A lot to cover there. Let's start first with Audius. I had a couple, thoughts as you were describing that. One is, how do you differentiate an artist getting involved from like that streaming perspective versus maybe uploading a song and to be purchased as a mint in an NFT? Do you approach them like I should be doing both, or maybe there's a time and place for one and the other?
I think you should be doing both, but there's also a time and place for it. I think having your back catalog on Audius for your fans to access is a really easy thing to do that doesn't require a lot of knowledge or effort. Within Audius profiles, you can connect a MetaMask wallet to show the NFTs that you've created and owned. And so being able to go from having a page that shows your music to one click being able to see the NFTs that you're collecting, it really helps to build legitimacy. So I don't think that Audius is meant to be the core vehicle for you to monetize on the back of your fans. I think it's really meant to show that you are active and present in this crypto community. And the more that you can signal that on your social graph through your Audius profile, if I'm someone that's coming and poking around in sort of wider Web3 times music crossover. If I see that you have a gold badge on Audius, which means that you hold a certain amount of tokens and you've connected your MetaMask wallet with a couple niche NFTs here and there, I'm going to be a lot more likely to consume your music, and I'm going to spend a lot more time and effort on your project because I can see that you're giving this a really meaningful shot.
For sure. Cool. Good explanation. And then with Royal, how do you envision, new artists their willingness to give up some of their royalties? I feel like it's kind of a I would say belief in the artist community that, giving up your royalties or your masters is, you got to keep those as close as you can. How do you approach that from the artist perspective and make it worthwhile? Like, what's the benefit of allowing that fan investment in them?
So I think the most important thing to call out is that Royal is going to be all retroactive investments in catalogs. These are going to be all songs that have already been released. And so there is a proven strategy there. The people have released the song, it's being streamed on DSPs. You're going to be able to see a track record for it. And so from an investment standpoint, it's going to be easier to gauge whether or not it will be successful. I think the sad reality is that most masters aren't really worth anything. Of all the music in the world, I would say that about 5% of all the songs that exist create, the vast majority of the revenue across the board. And so if you are an up and coming artist, this is a way for you to get liquidity that you would never normally get otherwise. Being able to sell NFTs that represent ownership in your early catalog is a way for you to build super fan relationships. And while I totally agree that you should never give up more ownership than you feel comfortable with, your ownership is not valuable if there are not people around it that are supporting and consuming it. And so in the same way that startup founders sell equity to bootstrap their companies to value-added partners, I see Royal being the same thing for artists, where you are selling a slice of that cake to your super fans so that they can be more involved in the activation and the advancement of your project.
Heck yeah. If there are any artists listening, I think you should rewind the last couple minutes and take note on some steps that you can be taking today to really, kickstart your Web3 journey and taking advantage of some of these new tools. Sweet. Thanks for all those descriptions. Is there anything else you wanted to cover there? Otherwise, I think we can maybe take a step towards the next part of our podcast and ask some future looking questions.
Yeah, I'll just caveat and say that there are a lot more music plays that are on the horizon here. If you're an artist that's looking to get involved in Web3, I would say that you have until the end of 2021 to make a really meaningful play in this. Otherwise, start treating this as a 1 to 2 year time horizon. Don't worry about trying to pop off and do the craziest thing possible. Spend the next couple months just proving legitimacy. I think that legitimacy is earned through intention and earned through time commitment. It's not earned through financial capital. And so I don't care if you go and sell an NFT and you raise $50,000. I care a lot more about how active you are in the communities that people know and love. And so if you're thinking about getting started today, don't worry about planning out your next big NFT drop. Try and focus on spending your time in these communities and look at this as a very long time horizon.
And you kind of say that you have until the end of 2021 because that's when some of the opportunity to jump in and get big money is still going to be present before the influx of thousands, and that opportunity kind of goes away as it's spread out across a broader pool. Yeah,
I'm calling market top December 2021. That's basically where that comes from.
Gotcha. Okay. Good to know. I feel like I saw one of your tweets. You said I think it was in early September, you called a price prediction for ETH. So I guess calling market top for that whole crypto space end of the year.
That's exactly right.
All right. Act accordingly. So, all right. From there, I kind of wanted to get towards our roadmap, our future looking part of the podcast. We can hit on these pretty quickly if you'd like. I just wanted to know, what's next for you in terms of, FWB, work with Audius, and just, personally, Cooper, like where do you want to go and take this, take your career, and what kind of work do you want to dive into in 2022?
Yeah. So over the next few months, I want to work with as many creators as possible to get them from 0 to 1 to doing a cool crypto experiment. So if that's launching your first NFT, if that's running a crowdfund, if that's starting a DAO, I am meant to be a guide for you to be able to not look like an idiot when you're doing these things. And so I spend my time educating creators on how to get involved, what pockets to be spending their time in, and showing them that there is a path forward here, but that you need to be really meaningful and intentional in your own involvement. I'm not here to be a broker. I'm not here to commission on the back of your NFT sales. I am here to show you that there is a very, very bright future ahead here if you take the time and effort to learn about it. And if I can be useful in those first couple baby steps to get you on your way, I think that that's a very successful opportunity. I would say looking at this over a 5-year time horizon, I believe that we are in the MySpace era of crypto right now. I don't think that we're anywhere close to mainstream adoption. And so my goal is to basically run a lot of experiments with a lot of different creators to see what's working, work across a lot of projects and communities to try and build products and service that capture this whole creator economy lens. And then hopefully in 5 years from now, we take a step back. And I think that all the pieces will come together in a lot more meaningful way. And I'm hoping that I can be a part of a project that plays a really meaningful role in its advancement.
Beautifully said. And just to clarify, when you talk about wanting to work with artists to help go from that 0 to 1, is that encompass music, graphic, like writers, the whole spectrum, or is there really a niche that you want to be focusing with?
It's not too clearly defined. Music is the industry that I'm most well connected to and the one that I have the most cultural knowledge of. So it's very easy for me to get involved in those pockets because I just know a lot about it from a past life. But the reality is these experiments translate to creators of any type and any personality. And so I'll basically sit down with the creator, run a little NFT masterclass, tell them about what's happening in the market, show them why CryptoPunks went up so much, show them what the fuck art blocks are and things like this, just get them aware of what's happening. And then from there, spend a little bit of time with their team on, hey, if we were to do something here in the next 3 months, what does that look like? Try and hire a team around them to go launch it and get that thing off the ground so that they can have the experience to go and start something and hopefully make a big impact with it.
Totally. And then, I think it would be remiss not to talk about the Coinbase NFT Marketplace, since today, as we're recording, that just got announced and released to the public, at least the wait list. What are your thoughts on that? And in terms of, the introduction of a new marketplace, Coinbase having 60 million plus, crypto users on their platform and that integration, where do you see that taking us?
My thoughts is that I have not even looked at it. And until you started this podcast, I did not even know that it came out today. I think more broadly, it's a really positive step in the right direction. I think that it's getting closer to consumer grade adoption of NFTs, which is interesting and exciting to me. But I do worry that Coinbase now introducing people to the PFP game is going to get a lot of people burned over the next couple of months. And so while on the surface, I think that it's a really vital piece of infrastructure, I also want to caution people. Everyone telling you you're going to make money off of NFTs is lying to you. Most of the money to be made off NFTs has already happened. I think that it makes a lot of sense for you to start learning about this technology and be aware of it. But do not go into Coinbase's NFT platform expecting to make 100x return, because the single reason or the fact that Coinbase just launched an NFT feature is an exact testament to me that this is getting into some really bubbly territory right now. For sure.
Yeah, good to approach this whole space with caution, even amidst the excitement. So from there, I think we've covered really everything that I wanted to dive into in terms of the meat of this podcast. I'd like to wrap it up with a couple rapid fire questions. I'm calling it 1, 2, Web 3. You ready for that?
Yeah, I love that title. Let's fire.
Okay, cool. So I want to know who's an influential Web3 creator, builder, thought leader that really inspires you.
Punk6529. You called him out at the beginning of the podcast. This is probably my favorite account to follow on Twitter right now. And knowing about some of the stuff that he's working on behind the scenes, I think that there's a lot to learn from his intention and way he moves in the community.
For sure. Yeah. Every thread he puts out, must read for me. All right. Favorite NFT?
Favorite NFT is something called Generate from Fuck Render. This was my first big one of one purchase on Super Air. It was my first opportunity to spend FaceTime with Fred before he got into the huge NFT celebrity that he is today. And so being able to make a highly convicted bet on him and watch him turn into the success story he is today has been a really positive experience for me.
That's awesome. And then last question, in 5 years, what's the craziest thing that we'll be doing in the metaverse or, with NFTs, with Web3 that people aren't even thinking about yet today?
It's supposed to be a rapid fire question.
Yeah. I listened to one of your podcasts and I think someone ended it with asking you about loot and DAOs. And that was not easy that's not a good last question, but I'm hitting you with it.
Yeah, I would say that we are going to be living in the metaverse in a very real way in 5 years from now. You're going to be investing in literally everything around you, from the furniture in your house to the title to your car to the artist that you know and love. The tokenization of everything is upon us. And I think we're getting some really cool games where you are going to be borrowing against millions of dollars of social capital and tokens that are spun up in thin air. So I would say right now, if you're thinking to prepare for that future, now is the time to land grab as many new assets as you can, because in 5 years, you're going to be able to put those to work in really meaningful and exciting ways.
And what, just to clarify, when you say new assets, you mean both landmark NFTs as well as cryptocurrencies?
Yep. I think that there are going to be digital nation states. I think we're going to be spending our time a lot more with the people we spend time with online than in person. So when you think about your jurisdiction, you are going to be signaling alignment with online communities the same way you would play a video game on a very real level, but your net worth is going to be entirely tied to where you're spending your time online. So this goes from being a fun thing you're doing on nights and weekends to being the leaderboard of life.
The leaderboard of life. That's something to think about. All right. Well, Cooper, thank you so much for being on the Good Morning Metaverse podcast. This podcast is presented by Mint Songs, and I just really appreciate your time today. So we'll be sure to stay in touch and putting this out soon for everyone to listen to.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Good Morning Metaverse podcast, presented by Mint Songs. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter @Mint Songs and reach out if you'd like access to our NFT platform for artists.